So for tonight even we will live stream as well in our YouTube channel, Nura Publishing. So for those who have, maybe we will, for those who want to watch it later, you can just go to our channel. Okay, so this is 7 p.m. sharp in Jakarta, or maybe for me, this is from Bogor time. So today is a Halloween party with Ruth Ware. Yay! And Ruth Ware is going to have a conversation with us in Indonesia. It is a big honor, such a big honor for us from Indonesia, because this is not, this is our first time, right? For you to have like live streaming or conversation with Indonesian reader. I hope it will went well. It will go well. And today, before this started, I want to open this event. Okay, wait. I have to check the streaming. Yeah. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Selamat malam. Hari ini kita berada di acara Halloween Party bersama Ruth Ware. Perkenalkan, nama saya Dita dari Nura Publishing. Hari ini kita akan ada bincang-bincang dengan Ruth Ware, nanti akan dimoderasi oleh Mbak Gita Eka Pratiwi ya, Bibliogita kalau misalnya teman-teman pada tahu. I'll just introduce Mbak Gita first. So, Mbak Gita Eka Pratiwi itu asosiat psikolog di Biro Dwi Payana Bandung dan Pusat Inovasi Psikolog Unpad. Nah, saat ini tuh melakukan tugas profesional psikologi di bidang psikologi pendidikan dan psikologi industri dan organisasi, dan juga menekuni hobi menggambar khususnya color pencil drawing ya, dengan portfolio di akun Instagram @gita_eka_pratiwi, dan sampai pertengahan tahun ini cukup aktif menjadi volunteer di perpustakaan anak berbasis komunitas Pustakalana di Bandung, seorang avid reader dan book reviewer di akun Instagram @bibliogita. So I just found that Mbak Gita is one of your biggest fans, Ruth. So that's why I asked her to be your host for today. So let me introduce Mbak Gita. Maybe you want to talk about this. Oh, maybe before that, I forgot that this event is held between Nura Publishing and also Goodreads Indonesia. We have this Kakak Nura from Goodreads. She will say about your book later after we had a conversation. And then, okay, I'll just give this forum to Mbak Gita. Please, Mbak Gita.
Thank you, Dita, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. So nice to be here. Hello, Ruth.
Hi, such a treat to be here.
Okay, everyone, as you all know, we will Ruth Ware herself. Ruth Ware is an international #1 best-selling author, as you all know. Some of her books are In the Dark Wood, The Woman in Cabin 10, which is one of my personal favorite, and Lying Game, The Death of Mrs. Westaway, and The Turn of the Key that we are going to talk about tonight. They all have appeared on a bestseller list all around the world, including the Sunday Times and the New York Times. Okay, and I think her books is also already published in 40 languages around the world, including Bahasa Indonesia. So we are very proud that your book is already translated to our languages. And I would like to thank you so much for joining us today. Such a pleasure to have you, Ruth. And I have to say that I'm in between very excited and happy, but also very nervous.
Don't be nervous. I'm nice, I promise.
I'm such a big fan. And I think it's a blessing in disguise of this pandemic that I got to talk to you. We get to talk to you live via Zoom from the other side of the globe.
I know, it's such a miracle, isn't it? I've been able to
Yeah.
go to all of these places that I would never normally have been able to travel to in a single year. And it just feels like the miracle of technology.
Yes, I know. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us in this Halloween night here in Indonesia. It's already night. I think it's in UK still noon.
Yeah, it's lunchtime for us.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're not quite into the Halloween. I have my pumpkin, as you can see.
Yeah,
But we're
I have
not
my
into
pumpkin. In the
yours are
future.
much more impressive.
Okay, so I already prepared all of my question here. So Ruth, if you don't mind, I thought we just going to dive into with the interview. So everyone, we are going to talk about this book right here. I think this is The Turn of the Key in Indonesian edition. I think it's a lovely cover. You can see the, chilling atmosphere in the cover here. And this is an amazing book that's just been released in Indonesian by Nora Publishing, who hosted all this event tonight also. But before we talk more about The Turn of the Key, I think the audience here would also want to know more about your writing process, because some of our readers and the audience here is also a writer themselves, and maybe some of them also an aspiring writers, and you are known for your thriller novels, and I believe you have published your sixth thriller novel this year.
Yes,
One
yeah,
by
that's
one,
correct.
right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that was number 6.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping will be translated to Indonesian too. Finger crossed. So I think it's remarkable and so productive in writing thriller novels. And I wonder if you might explain to us why you choose thriller as your preferred genre, or do you always know that do you want to be thriller writers?
Well, no, the answer is I didn't always know that I wanted to write crime. In fact, when I started writing, which was years ago when I was a teenager, I wrote in every possible genre. I think I wrote romance, I wrote historical fiction, I wrote science fiction, I wrote fantasy, and it wasn't until I loved reading thrillers and I loved reading crime, but it wasn't until I had coffee with a friend one day and she said that she had never read a thriller set on a hen night, or a bachelorette party as they're called in America. And as soon as she said it, I thought, it's really strange. I've never read this either, and I don't know why not, because it's a brilliant idea. And I really, really want to write this book. And I'd never written crime before, in spite of really enjoying it. So it felt quite daunting to sit down and sort of, I think the relationship with reading crime is very different, because you're in a sort of battle of wits with the author. Really, as a reader, you are trying to figure out the puzzles and the solutions and the clues, and the author is trying to give you the information, but in such a way that you don't figure out the solution too early. So there's a lot going on in a crime novel. You have to come up with an interesting plot, a good setting, believable characters, an emotional journey, but also there has to be this really strong puzzle element going on in the background, which has to work alongside all of that. So when I decided I was going to write this, I sat down and read a bunch of other crime and thriller novels, basically to see how they did it. And it was people like Erin Kelly and Gillian Flynn who wrote Gone Girl, and all of those novels where you have a really strong emotional journey, but also a really clever puzzle in the background. And then, I sat down and I tried to write my own. But even while I was writing it, I don't think I really imagined that many people reading it. I think I thought I was sort of writing this slightly strange little British book that maybe my friends would read, and, perhaps my mother-in-law. but I never imagined that it would sell to so many countries and become such a success. And ever since then, every single new book that I write, every time I think I've forgotten how to do it and I can't think of an idea and I'm not sure if I'll be able to pull off the puzzle again. And so far I've continued to have ideas. But yeah, people always ask, where do you get your ideas from? And the answer is literally anywhere. You know, it could be the news, or it could be something that happened to a friend, or it could be just a weird couple that I see when I'm having dinner in a restaurant and I start to try to imagine what's going on in their relationship. But the turn of the key, I think the main inspiration for that came from reading lots of articles about this new phenomenon of digital abuse, which is where in a couple, one partner is typically the person who handles all the technology, who sets up the Wi-Fi, who perhaps installs security cameras or speakers in the house or Wi-Fi lighting or something like that, and they understand the system, they have all the passwords, they know how it works, and that can be fantastic. It can be really convenient, it can be environmentally friendly, but problems can sometimes come if the relationship breaks down, and then you can have a situation where one person is able to control and abuse the other by using all of this technology. So there have been cases when people have been spying on their partners through security cameras, or listening to them through the home hub, or reading their emails, or monitoring their movements through GPS. And this has become such a problem that there's now support groups to try and teach people how to detox their digital relationship after they leave someone. And reading this, I began to imagine a situation where technology could be used against someone in a very sinister way. And eventually that became the turn of the key, but it has a lot of other elements in it as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's like the horror or negative aspects of, technology that people are, can abuse, that just like you said. And I think it's really interesting that you can make it as an inspiration for a book. Or is there any possibility that you are going to see, maybe we are going to see that you are going to write another genre, maybe you are going to see Ruth Ware with a fantasy book someday?
I mean, it could be. I wouldn't rule it out. At the moment, I think, I'm known for writing crime and thrillers, and I love it as a genre because it is that combination of a really satisfying emotional journey, but also a really clever intellectual puzzle when it's done right. And to get to do both in the same book is just really fun. So I don't think I would want to stop doing that anytime soon. But totally, I could imagine writing something completely different one day.
Yeah, okay. And you just mentioned that when writing a thriller, the main challenge is to make the readers, such as myself, is as engaging as possible when we read your books. That you have to put like bits of information or clues throughout the book, to make readers like us on the edge of our seat, trying to guess who the culprit is or what really happened. Do you have any particular strategy or maybe a system to build mystery when you outline the book like that?
I don't really have a system. I know some writers have these incredibly organized ways of creating a plot where, they have a whiteboard with lots of diagrams, or some people have a timeline that they write out. I know one writer who uses a roll of wallpaper, so it's like this huge long roll of paper, and they plot all of the events on this paper. Other people use special software. I usually keep 99% of the plot in my head. But I guess the one thing that I try to do while I'm writing, I generally always know the solution to the mystery.
Okay.
Because I think as a writer, you have to play fair with the reader. And part of that means giving enough clues to the reader that they can solve the mystery, which obviously means in order to give the clues, I have to know the solution, because otherwise I can't drop those pieces of information. So I generally always know who did it and why at the beginning of writing the book. And the other thing that I try to do is give people a reason to turn the page, something that they want to find out, or something a little bit intriguing, or a question that they want to answer. And I think as a reader, I really like that. When I open a book and in the first few pages, there's something really strange or confusing or intriguing that I want the answer, and that just makes you turn the pages really quickly. And you have to answer the questions, but as you answer them, you then pose a new question, and I think that helps to create a page turning experience.
Yes, that is exactly what I experienced while reading all of your books. It makes me, I don't know, probably you finish your book in 1 or 2 days, because I cannot stop turning the pages. Like, I want to know what happened next. And okay, I've read about 4 out of your 6 books, and it all centered in female main characters. Is there any reason to this? Why do you choose female protagonists for your books?
I don't know. It's a really good question. People often ask if I would ever write a male protagonist, and I absolutely would. I don't think that women can't write men or anything like that. But I think that generally when I write a book, I'm trying to explain something that I'm concerned about or worried about, or something that I've experienced, or a real fear that I have. So for example, the woman in cabin 10 is a very extreme situation. It's about a woman who sees somebody being murdered on a cruise ship, and then nobody believes her. And that's obviously not something that has ever happened to me, but I think the fear at the heart of it is the fear of, what if you see something, or what if something happens to you and you tell a truthful version of what you saw, but people don't believe you because you are a young woman, or you've had too much to drink, or you're on prescription medication, that people don't believe you just because of who you are rather than what you're saying. And that, I think, is a fear that lots of people have, lots of women experience in particular. So I think because of that, because I'm a woman, my fears tend to be rooted in the female experience. And so that's what I've wanted to explore so far. So I don't think I've finished talking about what it feels like to be a woman in the 21st century. And for that reason, I'll probably carry on writing those characters. But yeah, I would definitely consider writing a male narrator one day.
One day, okay. But it's interesting when you talk about the characters of your books. It's rarely very perfect. It's some mostly unreliable. Or do you have any experience where the readers tells you that they don't like the characters, or even they hate it, or
all
frustrated? Oh, okay,
yeah, all the time.
with the
People
characters.
very often come to me and say, so and so really annoyed me, or she made really poor choices, or she did stupid things. And I think partly we are all a lot more unreliable and irrational than we like to think. All of us want to think that we would make the perfect logical decision in all situations and always act sensibly and ethically and do the right thing. The truth is, of course, people don't act like that at all. I don't, we don't, you only have to read a newspaper to realize that people do incredibly stupid things all of the time, things that I would never be able to put in my books, because if I did, no one would believe it. And we're not as reliable as we think either. You know, when I talk to my sister about things that happened in our childhood, her version of it is completely different sometimes to what I remember. And it's not because we're lying or we're trying to deceive each other. It's just because every time you pull a memory from the back of your head, you recreate it and you change little details and you save the new version for next time, and then you change it again. So I think that unlikable, unreliable narrators are the most realistic kind. They're the most true to life. But also, I think perfect people just aren't very interesting. I don't mind it when people tell me that they don't like my characters. What I would find much more upsetting is if someone said that they found my characters boring. I think as long as they're interesting, complicated people who seem realistic, I've done my job. I don't really worry about them being likable.
I think what I like most is the realness of the characters. I think when I read it, I feel like, okay, I think I will know someone who will do things like her or him. So I think that's what makes your book is really good.
Oh, thank you. See, that's exactly what I'm going for. So the other thing I think that you have to be really careful about is this idea that people only deserve to be heroines or main characters if they're perfect. And the truth is, none of us are perfect, but that we're still all important. We're still at the center of our lives. We still deserve to have a happy ending. And the idea that people only get to be the main character and only get to have a happy ever after if they are this perfect person who never makes a mistake, never makes a poor decision, I find that really upsetting and troubling. You know, everybody deserves to be important and to be treated with respect, no matter whether they've made mistakes in their past or not. So I think that's part of the reason why I try to write complicated people.
Okay, lovely. Okay, let's now talk about the turn of the key. Maybe can you tell us the general idea of what this book is all about, but without spoilers, because
I'll try not to spoil. So I already talked a little bit about the technology in the book, but the plot begins with my main character in prison. And you know that she has been accused of the murder of a child in her care. So she's a nanny. She's been hired to look after these children, and one of them has died. And the book begins with her writing to her lawyer, explaining that she didn't do it and trying to convince him to represent her so that she, at her trial, she'll be found innocent. And the book becomes her explanation of what happened and her trying to justify why we should believe her. But you quite quickly discover that she's hiding some quite important things. Some of which she's honest about. She says up front, I'm not going to tell you this because it won't put me in a good light, so I'm not going to share this. Some of which she doesn't tell you about, but you find out much later. So it's very clear that she has her own agenda. She's an unreliable narrator. And she explains that she discovered this advertisement for a nannying position in a newspaper. And it seemed like the perfect position. It's really well paid. It's in this beautiful, smart house, you know, like a house with all mod cons and with like digital everything and digital lights and Wi-Fi enabled fridge. And yeah, the pay is just fantastic, slightly unbelievably fantastic. So she goes up and does an interview for this position, and she gets it, somewhat to her own surprise. But on the first night, she finds out that the previous 4 nannies have all left the post, citing strange occurrences that happened at this house. And as she settles in and begins to look after these children, more and more strange things begin to happen. And the technology of the house is playing up against her. There's strange noises in the night, there's strange sounds, there's doorbells ringing, just all sorts of weird things keep happening. And that's probably all I can say without getting into spoilers. But yeah, you know from the beginning where it ends, which is one of the children is dead. So it's sort of about getting to that point and finding out what happened along the way.
Okay. And it's interesting when you said that this book is written in unusual structure, if I have to say, or format, that this book is told in through letters that the protagonist is writing. And I think it is really interesting. And I wonder if you could talk about why that structure and whether there are any challenges that you face in writing that kind of format.
Yeah, so novels in the format of letters used to be very fashionable, sort of 200-300 years ago in English literature anyway. And they've slightly fallen out of favor now, I think perhaps because nobody writes letters to each other anymore. And there have been a few attempts to write novels in the format of blogs or emails, but they're not quite the same somehow. But of course, when you're in prison, that is the one time when people really do still write handwritten letters, because you don't have access to technology in the same way. So a novel set in a prison seemed to me to be the perfect time to write a novel that was also told in letters. I guess the reason I wanted to do it in letters was because I'd written a lot of unreliable narrators. And I wanted to explore the idea of unreliability, but in a slightly different way. And because you know the novel is a letter, and you know that it's a letter written to a specific person trying to persuade them of something, you know that it's unreliable, but it's sort of unreliable in a very honest way. Like, she doesn't try to pretend anything. She says, I'm writing to try to persuade you of this, and I'm going to present the facts in a way that puts me in the best light. And as the reader, you are kind of the lawyer in this case. You never hear his side of things, you only get her letters. So I love the idea of a narrator who was unreliable, but in a very honest way. But it was quite challenging to write, because there are some things that you just wouldn't put in a letter to a lawyer. And there were points in the book where I wanted to write stuff, and I thought she wouldn't put this on paper. It's not realistic. When I started off, I was concerned about writing the whole book as one long letter. But I read two books which really convinced me that it could be done really well. One was a book called You Don't Know Me by a writer called Imran Mahmood. And that's done as one long courtroom speech. So it's a lawyer, the defendant in a court case giving the summing up in court, and he gives the whole novel is his speech. And of course, in reality, it's completely impossible, because no judge would ever let someone stand up and just talk for 10 hours or whatever it would be. But in reading it, you just completely suspend your disbelief, and you believe it. You believe this is someone standing up in court giving a speech. And the other novel which does a similar thing is Delores Claiborne by Stephen King, which is a woman who goes into a police station and gives a statement to the police. And again, it's all her voice. You never hear from the police. And she just talks, and sometimes you can assume the police have said something, because she'll say, like, you be quiet, I knew you when you were in nappies, you don't talk over me. But you don't hear from the police. And again, it's completely implausible, because you just can't imagine the police sitting there while she fills tape after tape after tape with this long, but he convinces you that it's possible. And I thought, okay, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. And I think after the first few letters, most people just sort of get into the swing of it and don't question it too much. So,
but the challenge is to make it real, about like plausible, that the letters. I think when I read it, sometimes I forgot that it's a letter, and then you put something conversation that, oh yeah, she is writing a letter to her lawyer.
Yeah, I think
it's
exactly that. There were points where I didn't want people to be thinking about the fact that she's writing a letter too much, because I just wanted you to be in the narrative, feeling what she feels and thinking what she thinks and being really scared or really happy or whatever it is. And too much, dear Mr. Wrexham, would have spoilt the illusion. But at other times, exactly, I wanted to just remind people, P.S. you are still reading a letter, don't forget that. So yeah, there's a certain amount of kind of zooming in and out.
Yes, that's what I think it's the most interesting when I read this, The Turn of the Key. And I think as far as we know, that The Turn of the Key is inspired by Henry James' The Turn of the Screw. Is it true, or could you explain to us why you are interested in exploring the story?
So for anybody who doesn't know it, Henry James's The Turn of the Screw is a Victorian novel about a nanny who is in charge of two small children in a house that she becomes convinced is haunted. And so she's alone with these children, going progressively more and more scared and neurotic. And you, as a reader, you start to feel quite concerned about her and about her motives and her sanity, really. And I'd never read it. I knew about it because I studied English, so I knew the plot and the basic idea of the novel, but I hadn't read it. And I started writing this book about a nanny in charge of a bunch of small children going progressively more and more off the rails. And about halfway through, I suddenly thought, oh, I think I'm writing The Turn of the Screw, because I knew enough about the plot to know that there were very significant overlaps. So at that point, I thought, I think I have to go back and read The Turn of the Screw, because if I'm going to have overlaps, I need to do it deliberately rather than by mistake. So I stopped writing and I went back and read The Turn of the Screw, which is fantastic. It's really spooky. I recommend it. It's also very short. And it really reassured me, because although the premise is similar, I think what we were doing was very different in a lot of ways. The questions I was asking was different, and the ending is very different. Both books end with a question to the reader, but they are completely different questions. But I knew that I owed Henry James a debt of inspiration, just because he wrote the first and arguably the best novel about a nanny and the pressures of looking after small children. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. So when it came to choosing a title, I did a sort of, tip of the hat to Henry James and said, thank you very much. I didn't want it to be a secret that I was inspired by it. So that's why I chose a similar title.
Okay. Now you answered all of my, really curious, why is it called The Turn of the Key, and it's very, very similar to The Turn of the Screw. Okay. And okay, now besides Rowan in this book, the main character is also the house itself, the Heatherbrae house. And I've never been to Scotland or seen any Victorian, type of house, but I imagine it some sort of like a huge old ancient house in remote hills somewhere. But what is interesting is that it's also a smart house. So there's a combination of on the other hand, it's old and traditional, but in the other hand, it's a smart house, so it's a modern and futuristic. So I wonder, what is your inspiration in using technology in that way for this book?
Well, so the idea of using technology as a way to torture people really came out of reading these articles about digital abuse. And, you know, I was watching things like Dirty John. I don't know if you've seen that series. Yes. It's about a woman who is basically tortured by her ex using her security cameras, and, you know, he puts a GPS tracker on her car and he's hacking into her speakers. And I'm really interested in the fact that we allow technology into our lives so easily, and we worry about the effects. But, you know, when we think of a hacker, we imagine someone in Russia or, you know, very far away, someone who maybe doesn't speak our language, who's just some stranger on the internet being a hacker. And actually, the reality is, most people who have problems with this kind of technology, it will be someone they know. It's not a stranger hacking in to read your emails from, you know, 100 miles away. It is your friends, your lovers, your parents, your kids. You know, it's sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. And we're much more scared of strangers than we are of the people we know. But statistically, the people we know are the ones who are going to be a threat to us. So I was really interested in exploring all of that and our attitude to technology, the way we're getting more and more dependent on it. But also the house in the book, as you mentioned, it really is a house of two personalities. From the front, it looks like a very traditional Victorian Scottish hunting lodge. It's, you know, it's made of stone. It's very old-fashioned and traditional. But then at the back, the couple who own it, because they're architects, they have torn away the back half of the house and built this incredible glass and steel kitchen that's like ultra modern, has a concrete floor, and it's just got a completely different personality. And one of the themes of the book is about the personality that we display to other people versus the real true us that we are behind. And so I love the idea of the house in the book kind of reflecting that, the idea that it would look like one thing from the front, but actually when you got to know it, you discovered that there's other much more complicated, very different things going on underneath the surface. And that's a theme that you see coming up again and again in the book with the people in the book.
Okay, that is so interesting. That's like a facade that people often really show to other people, but deep inside there's some more complicated things.
Exactly. And, you know, it's true, the house, it's not a fake, like the house really is a hunting lodge on the front. It's not that it's pretending, but it's just that there's a lot more going on than you might at first realize. So
okay, so yeah, that's why it's when you read it, it feels like the Heather Bray house is also the main character besides Rowan, because that's what you feel when you read it, that this house has a personality. I think but I'm interested if you would you want to have a smart house maybe in the future, or live in the smart house?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't own an Alexa or, you know, a Google Home or anything like that. But I think all of these things are sort of slowly creeping in. So we bought a dishwasher the other day, and it's the dishwasher has Wi-Fi, and you have to use the Wi-Fi in order to set the salt level for your region. You have to say, I live in this postcode, and so I need this salt level. And you can't do that manually. The only way you can do it is by hooking up the Wi-Fi. So now I have a smart dishwasher, and I wouldn't have chosen it, but that's now the reality. And, you know, in order to watch Netflix, I have to have a smart TV. So now my television provider knows much more about me than if I just had a television with an aerial. And so I think, no, I wouldn't choose to live in a smart house. I wouldn't put in digital lighting and, you know, speakers everywhere and join everything up. But I think slowly we are becoming smart houses, whether we like it or not. And partly because it's just so much more convenient. You know, I love having sat nav in my car and just putting in a destination and my car tells me where to go, because I'm not there with a map kind of trying to map read and steer with one hand and getting lost. But now that means that my sat nav provider knows everywhere I go and can put a point on my car at any time. You know, that's just what I accept. That's the price I have to pay. So
yes, it's slowly seeping in, but I was hoping that it would not be that fast because then it's so scary for me. The only thing I like about that smart house is the shower that you describe in the book. I think it's my dream shower. If I can take one thing from that house, is the shower, I think.
For people who haven't read the book, my main character gets in the shower on her first day, and it's got like all these settings for all the previous people who've lived there. So she's sort of poking at the thing, trying to. I think part of that is obviously just who doesn't love a really nice shower, but also I've been to so many hotels for promoting my books, and increasingly the hotel rooms are getting more and more techie. And there's always things like, you know, last thing at night you're trying to turn off that one light and you can't figure out, you're like, where is the panel? There's like some smart setting, and and in the end you're like, I'm just going to go to sleep with the light. So I think Rowan's constant frustration with not being able to make the technology work is my frustration.
Yes, with lighting, I think I'm much more comfortable with the manual switch on and off without the, you know, complicated panels. Okay, lovely. And I think we won't talk more the specific about the book because I don't want to ruin the experience.
No spoilers
for our audience who haven't read the book yet. But okay, most of us here I believe, is an avid reader, just like myself. And I think you are too, looking at your bookshelves there. And since a writer, I think must also be a reader. I was wondering, what are your most recent books that you have read and really enjoyed, and maybe recommending it to everyone here?
Oh, good question. I always feel really put on the spot when I'm asked this. And part of the problem is because I often get sent books by publishers, which is amazing, but I get sent them usually a year or sometimes even 2 years in advance of publication. So I'm recommending this book, even though no one is going to be able to read it for 2 years. And then I can't remember the book that I was reading 2 years ago, which is now published. But one book I'm reading at the moment, which isn't published yet, but I'm really enjoying, is Deep Waters. And that's going to be published by Simon & Schuster in America. And it's so the beginning is a young woman who is found drifting on a yacht in the middle of nowhere, and I think her partner has been murdered. There's blood everywhere, and she's rescued, and the rescuers try to ask her what's happened, and she's so traumatized she just can't. And then the rest of the novel is you finding out how she got into this position and what happened, and you figure out fairly early on it's not her yacht, it belonged to somebody else. So there's all of this kind of what's going on, why is she there. So I haven't finished that yet, but I'm really enjoying it. And a much older one, which I've only just discovered, it's a series of books called Slough House by Mick Herron. The first one is called Slow Horses, and they were published, I think sort of 10 or 15 years ago. And I've just started listening to them on audiobook, which I love audiobooks because you can listen to them in the car or while cooking, and my constant problem is that I never have enough time to read, because I'm always, I'm either writing my own books, or when I stop doing that, my kids need something, or I have to cook supper. So audiobooks are fantastic because I can just plug it in and carry on doing whatever else I'm doing. So
So that's the one thing positive about technology, audiobooks.
absolutely, yeah.
You can do some laundry or
You can
washing
multitask. Yeah, so
Yes.
I usually have, at all times, I normally have one real book and one, or not that audiobooks aren't real books, but one book for reading and one book for listening on the go.
Okay. That is the first novel that you describe is like like a perfect recipe for a thriller book.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to wait for that book to publish 2 years later.
I'm not sure. I think it might be due out next year, so hopefully only 12 months. So we'll see.
Okay. Last questions from me before we answer the question from the audience here tonight. What are your tips for us who wanted to become an author, especially a thriller writer?
Well, I always say if I had a magic formula, I would just bottle that and stop writing and just get other people to pay for my secrets. I think the main thing, as you say, is just to read. It's really hard to be a good writer without reading really widely, and learn to become a critical reader, in the sense of try to figure out what works for you. What do you like about the books that you're reading? What don't you like? What would you have done differently? And just, I quite often read something and feel intense admiration of how the author has handled something. So, for example, there's a book called Our House by Louise Candlish, that ends with like this absolute punch to the stomach moment on the very final page, where you're kind of like, what is that, the end of the book? How can you leave me there? And she did it so cleverly and so well. And I found myself thinking, I really want to write a book with that kind of ending, the kind of ending that leaves you going, and The Turn of the Key was my sort of version of it. It's not quite, I haven't done it quite the same way as she did, but definitely the ending of that, there's a twist at the end, which I hope people won't see coming. So that was my kind of homage to that. So I think, reading other people's work, seeing what you admire about them, seeing what you would have done differently is a really good way to go about it. But the main thing I would say is just write. I mean, I wrote probably 12 books before I even tried to get published. And they weren't very good, but I just needed those to find out what kind of writer I was, what I wanted to say, just to practice. And I read somewhere that you have to, it's like Malcolm Gladwell, I think, says something like you have to spend 10,000 hours doing something before you become an expert. And I don't know if I spent 10,000 hours writing, but I probably wrote at least 1 million words before I tried to get published. So I think sometimes people write something and they feel such huge pressure to make it perfect, to make it publication worthy on the first try. And of course you want it to be as good as it can be, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, if you don't get it right first time, that's absolutely fine. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Have fun, and then go back and write another book that's even better. I think I would give yourself permission to fail, is my advice.
Okay, that is absolutely amazing. So everyone here who is an aspiring writer or writer themselves, that's a great tips from Ruth Ware. Hope everyone is getting that advice and start doing it tomorrow. Okay, and so we are going to answer the questions from the audience. I will see what that Dita has picked for me to read. Okay, it's from Rachel. Okay, Rachel, I read on the internet that one of Ruth Ware's favorite writers is Patricia Highsmith. Do you have any plan to write a novel based on Patricia Highsmith's works? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no, I love Patricia Highsmith. I don't have any plans to write a novel based on her work, primarily because she's still in copyright. Henry James is not, so I can do whatever I like with his work as long as I acknowledge it. Patricia Highsmith published in the 1960s, and her books are very much still in copyright, so I will not be copying any of her plots or using any of her characters anytime soon. But I think definitely, a lot of the kind of clever tricks that she does in things like Strangers on a Train and The Talented Mr. Ripley, that's definitely the same kind of pleasures that I'm trying to create. Mr. Ripley, The Talented Mr. Ripley is such an amazing anti-hero, and I think that was one of the first books that I read where I really saw that you could put not just a not completely likable person at the center of it, but someone who was actually completely amoral. I mean, Ripley is a cheat, he's a murderer, he's a generally horrible person, and yet somehow you really want him to succeed, or I did when I read it. You're on his side all the way through, even though he's reprehensible. And I've always wanted to write an anti-hero. And I sort of started to write one in my fourth book, The Death of Mrs. Westaway, where the main character is a con artist. But what I found is that I liked her too much, so I kept sort of trying to make excuses about why her behavior was okay. And in the end, I don't think she turned out an anti-hero at all, particularly. She's just someone who gets sucked into doing something for the wrong reasons. So I'm not sure I could write a Patricia Highsmith, really. But yeah, her work's great. I highly recommend that you read her if you haven't. So
Okay, right. We have Mbak Nura here from Goodreads Indonesia community, and I think Mbak Nura is also already read your book, The Turn of the Key, and I was wondering what were her thoughts about The Turn of the Key. Maybe Mbak Nura, you want to say something to Ruth or to our audience here?
Hi.
Hi. Actually, I just finished this book last weekend. It's really intriguing.
Thank you.
And it started a bit slow when I compare it with Dark Wood. It's just too slow to my taste, actually, in the beginning. But it keeps getting intriguing, and when we know more about the other characters, it's kind of start to build the story, I think. And the smart home, like Mbak Gita said, it's really a bit creepy.
Good. I'm glad you were creeped out by it.
Yeah, and I saw the movie on the Netflix the other day, The Blind Manor.
Oh yeah.
I keep comparing that movie and this book, whether there will be a ghost or something, because you read about the footstep on the other floor and the glitch on the technology, and it's kind of like a modern paranoia, I think.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? We have so much technology in our lives now, and when it goes wrong, it does make you feel really paranoid. I think that's maybe why it's a relatable theme for a book, because we've all had that moment where the television has turned on when it wasn't supposed to, or our Wi-Fi speaker starts making strange noises. So yeah, I hope now everybody whose Wi-Fi speakers malfunction will be like
Yeah, and the moment when Rowan actually sleeping, and suddenly there's a lot of noise, and the kids are also a bit scared, and Jack come to the help, gitu kan. It's what happened? It kept me guessing every along the pages, and the story about the 4 nannies before Rowan. It's also making it more mysterious, and the creepy element, like I said, the locked closet, the poison garden, and the smart home with little to no privacy, I think. Because everyone, not everyone, I guess, but something always know what you're doing in wherever you will be in the house, like.
Yeah, like the parents keep coming on the speakers
Yeah.
going, "Hi, just wanted to let you know."
Yeah, and I think when Sandra tell Ellie or Maddie, I forgot, have you been studying? And she said yes, tapi but she didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And she closed the door very loudly to express her anger, right? It's kind of, what kind of home that I have? It's really annoying too, I think. And one thing that I love about this book is also the supporting characters like Jack and Jean. They're also very intriguing as Rowan was, and I don't think it will be a spoiler, but my only complaint was with the ending.
Well, yeah, we can't talk
Everybody.
about it too much, but for anybody who has read it and has questions about the ending, I have a post on my website about it, because my books often end not on a cliffhanger exactly, but leaving something for the reader to decide. So I wrote a post on my website about it, which you can read if you join my book club. So it's like it's behind a wall so that people don't stumble on it accidentally and get huge spoilers. But if you want to find out my thoughts about it, it's all on my website.
Okay.
Yeah. And because of that, I think I wanted more after becoming invested in the story, I think. So for other readers who haven't read this book, you should read it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manura.
You're
Just
welcome.
if you still, very curious with the ending, Manura can check out Ruth Ware's website with the explanation. I haven't read it too, but you said that you have an explanation about it. I can't wait to check it out.
It's not an explanation exactly, but it sort of gives some of the things that definitely wouldn't have happened, and some of the things that I think could have happened, and also explains what I was trying to do with the ending, and why I wrote it the way I did. So.
Okay, right. Okay, next question is from Zaki, or is anybody here want to speak with Ruth and ask her directly? Maybe? No?
Everyone's too shy.
Too scared. Too shy. Okay, I will read the comments here, the questions from Zaki. I'm finishing a script that contains a riddle in it. How do I arrange the clues that were previously compiled to solve the problem in the story, and how to make an impressive plot twist? Do you have any suggestions about making plot twist?
Yeah, so the riddle is like an actual riddle that you've sort of incorporated into the book, or it's just the puzzle of the book? I probably would answer differently each way. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to practice, but in terms of laying clues for your readers and giving them the information that they need to solve the mystery without giving them too much information, a lot of that you only figure out by experience, and I still get it wrong. But a really good thing to do is to give the book to a friend, and ask them to read it, and while they read it, to jot down in the margin of the book what they're thinking. So, my editors sometimes do this for me. They'll have a column beside the main text of the book, and they'll put in things like, oh, at this point, I'm really suspicious of Jack, or, you know, I definitely think that, you know, so-and-so has done it at this point. Or I'm assuming she's lying here, and what she's actually, and it's sometimes it's not things that I ever intended for them to think. And it's fascinating to discover how they're reacting to my characters. And sometimes it's exactly what I want them to think. And sometimes I read it and I realize that I've given a bit too much information because they've got to the solution too fast. So that is hugely useful if you're just trying to figure out, have you done it right? So I highly recommend that. You do need to have a very good friend. I would say when you're asking people to read your work, it's really helpful to remind them that they're not editors. You want their response as a reader, because people who are reading an unpublished manuscript, I find, often want to correct spelling mistakes or, you know, suggest alternative words and things. And actually, all of that is not particularly important. You know, that can be done later on. What you want from them is for them to say, this bit was intriguing, this bit was boring, this bit I didn't understand what was going on, this bit I definitely suspected X. And so just sort of give them that brief and explain to them how to do a really good plot twist. This is so hard, and every single time the truth is I don't know how you do it. I think there's Steve Kavanagh, who's a Northern Irish writer who writes books with very big twists. He did a Twitter thread a while back about the different types of twist, which is really useful, and I'll see if I can find it and retweet it so it will be high on my Twitter profile. But there's only a very limited number of massive twists. In terms of, it could be something like you think person A is person A and actually they're person B, or, you know, you think something is happening in the present and actually it's happening in the past. So all things to do with perception. The other twist, which I tend to do, is simply just there is information that you don't know, and that's the kind of twist that happens in The Turn of the Key. About halfway through, there's a big piece of information which you could figure out, like there's plenty of clues in there, but I hope that the mostly readers don't, and it's suddenly revealed halfway through and it changes how you feel about the characters. And that's just knowing something that you deliberately don't tell your reader. Like there's no secret about that. But yeah, a plot twist in the sense of completely upending the book, the way, say, Gone Girl does, or I Let You Go, those are pretty specific and they have to be baked in from the start, and there's not that many ways of doing it. So I think if you're trying to pull off one of those, the only real way of doing it is to look at what other writers have done, try to decide which kind of twist you're going to do, and figure out how it fits with your plot. But yeah, good twists are really, really hard. And I don't put them in all of my books. You know, there's always a reveal. There's always something that I know that you don't. But in terms of a really big plot twist, you just can't do one every single time. They're too difficult.
Okay. Okay, Zaki, hope it will answer your questions. Next one is from, sorry, I have to, okay. From Icha Iskandar. Hi, Ruth Ware. It's an honor to meet you here. I love The Turn of the Key so much, and I want to ask you some question, but unfortunately, I'm not fluent enough in English, so I hope I can help her to translate them. Okay. I have to read it first in Indonesian. Okay.
Don't worry, your English is guaranteed to be better than my Indonesian. So.
Okay.
Well, you're already 1 point up on me. So.
Okay. Okay. I think the first question is already answered by you from what is your inspiration in behind using a smart house with a murder mystery, and you have already answered that. Oh, I think this is going to be a spoiler. the
Oh
second
dear.
one, mungkin.
Maybe come and find me on Twitter if it's too big a spoiler
Nah,
for an
okay.
event, because I don't want to spoil it for everybody else, but I'm happy to answer stuff on Twitter. So
Yes, okay. Maybe Icha, you can ask Ruth later on in the Twitter. But this one is, I think, will be a spoiler to everyone, because I think it's not really the main thing, but when I read it the first time, it's something that I really find it really, what you say it. I think it's one of the experience that you want to have when you read The Turn of the Key. So it's not a really big thing, but I want
it's big enough that you don't want to spoil it for other
okay.
people. Yeah.
Okay, next one is from Reza Pahlevi. Hi Ruth, it's nice to meet you. Sorry if it may have been repeated earlier, but how do you think mystery genre has evolved since the past? Do you prefer, PS, do you prefer Matt Damon's Tom Ripley or Alain Delon's Tim Ripley?
Well, I've only seen the Matt Damon one, but I thought he pulled it off really well. I need to watch, the other version to compare.
You should.
But I thought the
The
Matt
other one is
Damon
very
was
awesome.
amazing.
Okay, so Reza, maybe you want to talk directly to Ruth and ask your questions.
Yeah, thank you. I think the reason I asked this question is, I think in the past, I mean, in the Patricia Highsmith's book, The Talented Mr. Ripley, I see that, I don't know if the obsolete is the right word, but the psychology implementation is kind of feel like odd. I mean, we don't know if Tom Ripley is a homosexual or he's just an opportunist, but do you think now, with the knowledge of psychology is getting better, is it influential to the character? And
no, it's a really good question. I definitely agree that crime and thriller novels have hugely evolved in terms of, when you look at Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie, they're very puzzle based. The psychology isn't really a huge part. The murderers always have a motive, but the point of the book isn't really the murderer's motive. It's the point of the book is the puzzle and the intellectual challenge. And definitely the genre has evolved much more, I think, to be I don't want to say more realistic exactly, because I think it's a different form of unrealisticness, but definitely much more interested in the people and the motives and the psychology behind it. And that's part of the reason why I write psychological thrillers, because I'm much less interested in the crime, and I'm much more interested in the effects of the crime. I sort of compare my books to like a pebble thrown into a pond, and the crime is the pebble, but what I'm writing about is the ripples from the pebble, and that's what I'm really interested in. And definitely, I think as a society, we've become much less preoccupied with solving crime, because it's much harder to commit crimes now in terms of DNA evidence and everything, and much more interested in preventing crime and in understanding why people do the things that they do. And for that, psychology is key, because if you want to stop someone from committing a crime, you have to understand what motivates people to commit crimes and why they do it. And so I think perhaps the shift in crime fiction is a reflection of our preoccupations in society. But yes, I think we treat everybody involved as much more human, including the perpetrators, and including the victims as well, because very often in sort of Agatha Christie style stories, the victim really doesn't have much of a backstory. They're just a dead body. And now I think we've become much more punctilious about giving the victim a personality and a life story, and really helping the reader to understand the impact of a crime. And Patricia Highsmith is probably somewhere in the middle, in the sense that I think she is very much interrogating the psychology of her characters. As you say, Tom Ripley is an incredibly complicated person, but she doesn't try to explain it too much. She sort of presents the reader with this portrait and kind of lets you decide. Like, as you say, we don't know if Tom is gay. He could be, he might not be. We often don't know why he does the things he does. We're just presented with the information about his inner thoughts and his personality. So I think she's sort of right on that cusp where she's exploring it, but she's not explaining it too much. So it's she's maybe an interesting sort of middle point.
Yeah, and I think that's why, because I'm when asking about Matt Damon. Matt Damon is the one with the gay one, and Alain Delon is the one with the opportunist one. I mean, it's like two different book. I mean, one different book with two different interpretations.
Yeah, two completely different interpretations. No, I definitely want to watch the other version, because, as you say, it's fascinating. It makes you realize how much of a relationship reading a book is between what the writer puts in and what the reader takes out of it. And sometimes it's only when you see that on film that you realize, wow, that person saw the book in a completely different way to the way I did. Because as a reader, you only live with your own version of it. But when you see a film, you're forced to confront somebody else's version.
Okay. Mas Reza, do you think, do you want to ask another questions? Or...
I'm good enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. And next one is from Mas Fadli. Mas Fadli is from Detectives ID. This is a community that explore detectives, literature, and fiction in Indonesia. I joined this community also, so I know Mas Fadli, and also Mas Reza is in that community too. Mas Fadli, you want to ask Ruth directly, or you want me to read your questions? Hello, Mas Fadli. Okay. You want to ask?
Just read it.
Okay.
No.
I will read it for you. Okay. Mas Fadli said that I read an article from New York Times. Your writing style often compared to Agatha Christie. Both you and Christie choose settings and situations that foster the sense of dread that propels their characters to paranoia, and often they react violently as a result. So what do you think about that statement?
I think it's really true. And when I started writing, I had read a lot of Christie, but I wasn't thinking about Agatha Christie when I wrote my first book. And it was only when it was published and people started reacting to it and making comparisons to Agatha Christie that I suddenly realized how much of an influence she had had on me as a writer. And when I came to write my second book, which was The Woman in Cabin 10, I sort of had a choice of going one of two ways. I could either pull back from that comparison or I could lean into it. And I definitely chose to lean into it in terms of, as you say, Christie does that stifled, luxurious setting so well. You know, things like Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile, where you have this beautiful, picture perfect setting where everybody should be really happy, but something is wrong and it just turns it into this nightmarish experience. And I think that's what I love about reading her books, and it's what I tried to do in The Woman in Cabin 10, which is take this perfect, luxurious boat and turn it into a nightmare. It's something that I'm conscious of what I love about her books, and I try to provide the same pleasures when I write.
Okay, thank you. And then it's a second part question from Padli. Do you think psychological thriller is the most selling thriller mysteries books for this era compared with another style of thriller?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly, I don't know the figures, but certainly psychological thrillers are huge business. They're an enormous section of the bookshops, and they're very regularly at the top of the bestseller charts. I think certainly in the UK, I don't know about other countries, recently there's been a bit more of a move towards sort of slightly more cozy crime. We've seen Richard Osman's books being hugely successful over here. And maybe that's something to do with the times that we're living in. Everybody is very uncertain. Perhaps we want something a little bit more comforting. But I don't think psychological thrillers are going away or, you know, going to disappear anytime soon. They just, yeah, they're hugely popular with so many readers.
Mm-hmm. I think it's that's why psychology is also very popular right now, and people are more conscious about the maybe you want to know more about the psychology of other people. That's why psychological thriller is very popular too right now. And I heard somewhere that writers are the best psychologists, and because they explore the depth of the characters really well, and that's why they said that the best psychologist is writers. Okay, next question is from
Kak Nura will ask another question.
Oh yeah, okay, Nura, Mbak Nura.
Okay. Well, this is a more general question, I think. You often writing about domestic violence or sexual harassment, like the woman in cabin 10 or one by one, and the last one in this novel too. What do you want to deliver to the readers about this topic?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've never made it the sort of the main topic of any of my books, really. But it's definitely a theme that keeps cropping up. And I don't know if I'm really trying to say anything apart from the fact that it's such a common reality for women. I don't know any woman my age who hasn't experienced sexual harassment or sexual violence or domestic violence at some point in their life. You know, even if not very serious, I think everybody has had some kind of encounter with a guy on a bus who just wouldn't leave them alone, or a boss who's just a little bit too friendly and you really want to say back off, but you can't. And I think I just can't write about the experience of being a woman in the 21st century without saying this happens. And for some women, it happens a lot. And it really affects the way that we go about our daily lives, because you have to be conscious of it all the time. When you're walking home, you have to think about the guy who is walking behind you and whether, they're probably a perfectly nice guy, but you have to live with the possibility that they may not be, because in the past, perhaps they haven't been. So I don't think I'm trying to say anything apart from the fact that this happens all the time, constantly, and people reading my books need to understand that that's the world my characters are operating in.
Thank you.
Bit of a depressing answer, really.
But it's also real. This is our reality right now.
Yeah.
And everywhere in the whole world, I think. Not only in the Western world, but also here in Indonesia is also a very main problem, I think.
Yeah.
Very.
And I think, it's something that we can sort of easily forget or take for granted. But the fact is, statistically, across all societies, half of the population is on average bigger and stronger than the other half. And 90% of the violence flows one way. Women are overwhelmingly not in prison for violent offences. Men are. And that's just somehow seen as normal. And I guess maybe in including those moments in my novels, I just want to sort of say, should we just all be fine? Like, should we just accept this? Like, this is not, doesn't have to be that way. People could stop doing this. So yeah, it's probably just me sort of saying a little moment of,
Okay. Mbak Nura, do you have any questions?
That's enough, Mbak Gita. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Okay, next question is from Gita also. Okay, we both have the same name. From Gita. From all of your works, your books, which one is your most favorite works? The one that you're most proud of? And
I'm
why?
always asked this, and I can't. It's like being asked which is my favorite child. They're all my favorite. I mean, I guess I always have a soft spot for Inner Wood because it was the first one, and it exceeded my expectations in so many ways. I don't know if it's the one that I'm most proud of, but it definitely, it was the one that changed my life and enabled me to become a full-time writer, and I'll be forever grateful to that little book for doing that. And I think the one that you're usually proudest of or most invested in is the one that you're writing right now, because you always hope as a writer you're getting better. Obviously, not every book can be better than the one before it, but that's what you try to do. So yeah, probably the book that I'm writing right now, which is called The It Girl and is not published yet.
Next year?
Hopefully 2022 in English.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit longer in translation.
Okay, I haven't read the one that published this year. I will probably look
so much to catch up on.
Okay, next question is another one from Gita. Have you ever fall in love with the characters that you create yourself? If you have, who and why?
Oh, all the time. I think I love all of my characters, really. It's why I have such trouble writing anti-heroes, because really I like them all, and I feel sympathetic to them all, even the baddies mostly. In terms of in love, I don't think I'm like romantically in love with any of them, although I do quite fancy Jack in The Turn of the Key, who's like he's a gorgeous Scottish man, so what's not to like? But in terms of the characters that I would like to spend an evening with, I think probably Nina in Inner Wood. She's one of my favorite characters, and there's a character called Danny in 1 by 1, which is not published in Indonesian yet, but he's just lovely. He's one of my favorite characters. He's just really nice. A lovely guy. I don't tend to write too many just extremely nice people, and Danny is an extremely nice person.
Okay, this one probably the last questions, but it's a two-part questions. Okay, from Icha again. Which Agatha Christie's novels does you like the most, and why? That's the first question.
Okay. It's really hard to pick just one, but I think in terms of the one where I admire the plotting the most is probably And Then There Were None, which, you know, is the one that's set on the island where they're all, and my next book, 1 by 1, it's not a rewrite, it's very different structure, but it's kind of a tip of the hat to that book. So I'll probably have to pick that one, but I do love Murder on the Orient Express, and I've always wanted to go on the Orient Express, so that's one of my ambitions, is to go on the Orient Express. So if there's a writer in residence, if they're watching, I'd do it.
Okay, And Then There Were None is the best Christie's novels too, for my taste. And then the second one is, do you ever have any nightmares of the novel that you write?
No, I don't. It was a really good question. I don't know why not, because I'm a very squeamish, scaredy cat person. I don't like reading scary novels, and I often have bad dreams after watching scary films. But with my own books, no. And I think it's because usually actually writing the books is a kind of exploration of my own fears and phobias. So in a way, they're a form of therapy. So the fact that I've written it, I've sort of got it all out of my system and don't need to think about it anymore.
That's very, very good. There's the kind of therapy that writers should also explore. You know, cathartic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just pour your, insecurity or your problems in your book, and it becomes the bestseller. Why not?
And you get paid for doing it.
Yes,
exactly. It's the perfect combination.
Yeah. Okay, that is the last question, I think, from our audience. Thank you so much, everyone.
Great questions. Thank you, everyone.
Have already put their questions, and I think that wraps up our interview.
Well, thank you so much, Geeta. They were amazing. Your questions were fantastic. You really got me thinking.
Okay. And if you want any spoilers or you want to ask more, you can visit Ruth Ware's Twitter, right?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Ruth Ware Writer. So yeah, come find me, say hello.
Okay, and if you want to know more about the ending of the Turn of the Key, you can check Ruth Ware's website.
Yeah, join my book club and all will be revealed.
Okay, right. I think that wraps up for tonight, and it's already about 1 hour and a half. Didn't really feel like it.
No, it went so quick. I need to go and have lunch.
Okay, I think I will give the forum back to Dita from Nora. Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you so much. It's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Okay, today this is a wrap for our Halloween party with Ruth Ware. Especially, I want like to thanks to Ruth Ware, of course, and Mbak Gita for this conversation is very entertaining. Is maybe for those who haven't read yet the Turn of the Key, they will want to purchase this book. So don't worry, you can just purchase it in our website, mizanstore.com, tetap ya promosi ya. And also for Mbak Nura from Goodreads Indonesia, it's a pleasure to meet you here. And for the readers, and we will have another, maybe another event in the future. And for the, I want to give a present, a gift to 3 of our readers who have already asked the question. First for Ica Iskandar, and then Muhammad Fadli and Reza. Please contact me and contact us in our DM, Nura Publishing, or you can DM us in Instagram or Twitter. So please send us your name, your address, so we can send a gift from Nura Publishing. And also for Mbak Nura, we will have another gift for you as well. Mbak Gita, you want also?
Yes, me too.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for today. This is a great event, and maybe for those who want to just let us to make a screen capture photo. You want if you want to make turn on your camera, please, so I can, yeah. And also you, for those who have already the book, you can just pose with your book, The Turn of the Key. Okay, I'll count in 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the second one, 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Ruth. Have a nice
thank you so
lunch.
much for having me. It was lovely to meet you all.
Yeah, see you again. Bye-bye.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Hopefully we
semua.
can see face to face maybe someday in the future.
Oh, I would love that. I'd love to come to Indonesia, hopefully in some lovely future.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.